Hi, you are listening to One Step Wealthier podcast, where I help you to be a little bit better every day and to achieve your financial goals. Follow along with me, and every week we will talk about all things personal development and personal finance. Together, we can get one step wealthier. In this week's episode, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite indexes, the S&P 500. First of all, what is a market index? So a market index would be a basket of stocks that gives you exposure to different markets. So let's say instead of picking stocks like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, Tesla, which individually would require a lot of market research and a lot of time as well, you can just buy an index that contains these stocks. It is like these days when you cannot decide whether you would like a Mars, a Snickers bar, a Bounty, or a Twix, and you just end up buying a box of celebrations instead. So it would be exactly the same, but for stocks. So you're buying a box of different stocks. And there are some well-known indexes that you might have heard of. There are some European indexes, such as DAX, which represents the German stock market, FTSE 100, the UK market, Nikkei 225, the Japanese market, NASDAQ, which is mainly US technology companies, and also some other US stocks such as Dow Jones or S&P 500, the one I'm going to talk to you about. So the S&P 500, the Standard & Poor's Index, is a stock market index that represents 500 of the largest companies listed on the US stock exchange. So this index would give you a full exposure to the US stock market. And the good thing is that you do not have to live in the US to invest in it. So what are the returns of this market index? So since it was created in 1926, 98 years ago, this index has had an annual growth rate, including dividends, of approximately 9.8%. So that's compounded. And that would be 6% after inflation. So just to give you a quick example to make sense of those numbers, if you would have invested the equivalent of 100 US dollars in today's dollars 98 years ago, today in 2024, you would have 35,260 US dollars. So 98 years, that $100 has grown to 35,260 US dollars. So which companies compose this index? So the top 5 at the moment are Microsoft with 7%, Apple with 6.6%, Nvidia with 3.7%, Amazon with 3.4%, Meta with 2%. And other companies that also compose this index, among many, many others, are Alphabet, that's Google, Tesla, Visa, MasterCard, Johnson & Johnson, Salesforce, Netflix, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, Airbnb, etc., etc. I'm sure you can Google the S&P 500 index and find an updated list of the companies. As you can imagine, this index constantly changes because when the company becomes unprofitable, that company simply is no longer part of the index. And when a company becomes profitable, what happened to Tesla recently, the index welcomes that company. So the index is constantly renewing itself. So how can you invest in this index? So if you live in the US, it is quite easy to purchase the indexes directly. So you can also purchase the S&P 500 directly. In Europe, it's a tiny bit more complicated, but not much more complicated. So you can purchase the exchange traded funds or the ETFs, which mirror this index. My favorite one is the S&P 500 ETF by Vanguard. And if you live in the UK, You can open a stocks and shares ISA directly with Vanguard, for example, and purchase the ETFs there. Outside the UK, I have a really, really good experience with the Giro and Interactive Broker platforms. So I think you should try these as well. They're quite low cost and they have a different selection of ETFs. As much as I love this index fund, the S&P 500, I think it is important to hold other investments as well. So it is very important not to base your investments on just one geographical location or one industry. So the S&P 500 only has the US stock market and does not invest in any other markets. So I think it is a very good starting point, but the diversification is important. So that is not putting all your eggs in one basket. And also the great past returns, they do not guarantee any future returns. So it doesn't mean that this index will return 9.8% each and every year. Everything can change. I'm a big believer in the companies that are contained in this fund. However, everything can change. So it is very important to also buy other indexes in other geographical parts of the world. But all in all, I think the S&P 500 is a good starting point to investing that really gives you an exposure to world-renowned companies. For me personally, it gives me a lot of satisfaction to see the names of the companies that I invest in around me. I hope that my reflections have motivated you to start investing. Remember, the best time to invest was yesterday, and the second best is today. And please note that this is not individual financial advice. Please speak to your financial advisor regarding your individual financial needs. You have just invested in your personal development by listening to this podcast. Thank you for being here and helping yourself to become one step wealthier. Do not forget to subscribe to access new content every week and to better yourself. I hope that you have a wonderful day.